Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and let's mull over Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Besides being an absolute mouthful to say, Space Marine 2 is one of the most anticipated games of 2024. And I recently dove into the game on stream and played quite a bit off stream, and I want to talk about it and give my first impressions with this game. Because for me, the game is a tale of two different sides. I don't think it comes as a surprise to anybody that this game and Warhammer 40k in general is epic in scope. It's dark and gritty and just cool. It's like this beautiful merge between high fantasy and sci-fi. And Space Marine 2, even in the early hours that I've played, has an undying allegiance to being cool as all hell. The grandiose battles you find yourself a part of in this game, even early on, like within the first 20 minutes, are inspired. The sheer number of tyranids that the game can throw at you at any moment in time and that you can contend with, and it doesn't feel overly gimmicky. There's a few moments where I threw a grenade at a horde of Tyranid trying to climb over each other to cross over a wall, and when the grenade came off, they just kind of fell down instead of being blown away, but more often than not, the game feels great. The melee combat is visceral. It's simple, don't get me wrong, but it feels good to execute. It's quick and meaty, and the gunplay that the game also offers is extremely satisfying. Every gun feels good to fire, because when you hit enemies with your guns, the visceral feedback that you receive is good. The sound design is awesome. The recoil that the guns have feels good, but also watching the Tyranids get blown apart by your bolter rifles or your bolter pistols and whatnot feels good. And there's a surprising amount of enemy variety and offer even in these early hours with the Tyranids. You have Tyranids that specialize in ranged attacks, the Swarmers, you have two kinds of warriors, you have the Gargoyles as well, and this is only like within the first 2 hours of play. I think Space Marine 2 tries to focus in and hone in on two key aspects to its game. That is the sense of scale and the immersion in these battles, and keeping you in the action as often as possible. The story in this game is rather minimalistic, at least from what I've experienced so far. The characters are solidly okay. I like the chaplain and the lady that's in charge of the 8th Division of the Astra Militarum, they're cool. But everyone else just kind of has this rough war persona, which makes sense for 40k. But at least so far, I don't think it goes so far in the way of having too many memorable characters or characters that immediately grab me and my attention. But the real star of the show are the battles, the gameplay loop. And like I said before, it's quick and meaty and visceral. It's rather simple, but when you're fighting swarms of Tyranid, managing your armor, your HP, your ammo, on top of knowing when you have to parry or when to dodge certain attacks, even when they're telegraphed clearly to you, it can be a lot. And I think that works for this game. I've been playing on veteran difficulty because it says it's the intended experience, and I tend to prefer to play my shooter games on harder modes. And the game does an excellent job of always keeping the tension high. Even when you're at full HP, you can lose that quickly. And while you can regenerate it if you're quick enough, there will be times that you're not, and you just go down to barely any HP, or it at least feels as if you're like one gust of wind away from just falling over and dying. But you regenerate armor on finishing attacks and just executing enemies. And I find myself quite often managing to hold in there, even on low HP, because I'm able to get in parries or executions to keep my armor up. And skating by the skin of my teeth in a lot of these battles by doing that feels rewarding, tense, but I get the feeling of being able to walk out of these grandiose battles, nearly giving it my all and only just making it out. And I think for 40k, especially for Space Marine, that works well. And by God, man, the executions in this game are just mwah. The chainsword may be one of the most beautiful creations in all of fiction. Oh my God. Watching Titus run up to a Tyranid warrior, slam the chainsword right into their midsection, and then just tear through them with it. Oh, it feels good every time. or when another Tyranid like Scouter jumps at me and I grab it by the tail and slam it down, dealing AoE damage to all the other Tyranids around me, while also gaining armor back. Good God, does it feel good. They give you like a Berserker Rage mode, where you can actually regenerate your HP here, and that's quite nice. Now, I get that I'm playing on Veteran, so I should expect it to be kind of difficult. If there's one thing I kind of wish was slightly different in terms of the balancing, is I wish there were a few more med packs around the map. But there's one aspect to this game that is rather unique to me, but I do want to go in detail and talk about it here. And that is the way I chose to play this game. Normally, nowadays, I prefer to play shooter games with mouse and keyboard. So when I first started Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 on stream, I decided I'm going to play with mouse and keyboard. And in that stream, which lasted me about 2 hours, I made it to the section where you have to defend the radar dishes for the giant AA turret in like the first map. Very early on, you'd be going, Jmulls, how'd it take you 2 hours? You see, I stuck with mouse and keyboard for the longest time in that stream because I convinced myself that it was a skill issue. That I just had to get more used to the controls, to the flow of the game, and that everything would just fall into place. And it's possible that it still, is a skill issue, but off stream, I decided to start the game over again on the same difficulty, but to use an Xbox controller instead. I felt the game was far more comfortable, intuitive, flowed better, and I felt the keybinds were far better and more cohesive and understandable on a controller. That could just be residual muscle memory, because I tend to play a lot of games that have parry systems and dodge systems with controller, so that pre-built muscle memory translates better for me on controller than mouse and keyboard. But the game isn't just a shooter. There's quite a bit of melee combat with the sword or the knife that you can choose to use, because you will use them quite a bit against the Tyranid. At least I found myself using them a lot. While ammo can be plentiful, the AoE you get with melee combat in this game is really good, and I find myself wanting to engage a lot of Tyranid warriors in melee so I can get them into finishers, execute them, and regenerate armor. Or doing like a gun follow-up attack where if you parry an enemy correctly, they stagger a little bit and gives you an opportunity to, take out your bolter. Time slightly slows down and you shoot him right in the face. It feels good, because a lot of the times I find myself parrying, gun follow-up attack, they get into position because they take a lot of damage in that combo, to where I can then execute them and they die quickly, and it feels fast and visceral, meaty, and it feels like what Space Marine 2 should feel like. It feels like that flow that made me interested when I watched that Total Biscuit WTF Space Marine 1 video years and years and years ago. You feel like this super-powered Space Marine genetically altered to be nothing more than a sack of testosterone and badassery as you rip apart countless Xenos over and over and over again. It's amazing. And I find myself having far more fun with controller than mouse and keyboard. So if you find the game's controls to be a bit unintuitive on mouse and keyboard, my suggestion would be to try it out with a pad and see how that works for you. I'm not saying the game is unplayable on mouse and keyboard or anything, I just found it more user-friendly and intuitive on controller. One of the things I've been really appreciating about Space Marine 2 is just the spectacle of it all. Warhammer 40k is one of the most rich and iterated on franchises in all of media. And to translate something that grandiose into a game can be kind of difficult. There's quite a few 40k games, but none that immediately had, at least from what I've seen, that wow factor that Space Marine 2 has. Just looking up at the skybox, or looking out at the swarms of Tyranid coming right at you. The music is big and bombastic. I wouldn't call it all too memorable, but it fits the war, the grit that Space Marine 2 oozes out of every pore. And this isn't necessarily about Space Marine 2 itself, but more so about 40k. I love, like I said at the top of this video, this series' unabashed, unashamed allegiance to cool. The beginning of the game, when you're in the Death Watch, you're geared out in your Space Marine power armor, and you got a hood and a cape. Why? Who knows? I don't care. It looks cool, and I can appreciate that. I really can. It doesn't feel the need to over-explain every little detail. It throws you into this world and says, let's have some fun ripping apart some Xenos for the Emperor. And you know what? I'm down for that. The story itself in this game specifically hasn't necessarily grabbed my interest all that much, but it's been picking up a little bit. But I am rather interested in the world of 40k overall. When it comes to stories, I tend to be character focused, and there's not too many characters in this game so far that have really grabbed my interest, as I've talked about before. And I think the game can just feel as if you're going from like Horde of Tyrannid to Horde of Tyrannid to Horde of Tyrannid over and over and over again. But they do try and vary up the objective, or they change up who's with you. Having the Astra Militarum just shoot all their laser guns, and you just see the red lasers go all the different directions. It looks cool, sounds good, feels good. I love the aesthetic of the Astra Militarum. I love the sense of awe the NPCs of the Astra Militarum have towards seeing Space Marines, calling them angels and all that. It reminds me of the intro to the second level of Halo 3 back in the day, with all the injured Marines looking at the Master Chief and be like, oh my god, our savior's here. It's a cool feeling. I have had a couple of weird issues with the PC port, mainly when I'm trying to exit the game. It just like freezes. I've had to Alt F4 this game every time I turn it off, because when I click on exit game, it like freezes on the loading menu and just doesn't do anything. It's nothing too severe, it's just a little bit weird. I think 40k, in terms of its history with video games, has had a history of being perceived as, oh, this is pretty cool, but there's nothing that has really grabbed too many people's interests, at least in the way that Space Marine 2 seemingly has. So personally at least, I hope we get future titles that lean into the grandiose and the feeling of spectacle that Space Marine 2 has been able to elicit so far. Space Marine 2 so far is bloody, gory, violent, and adrenaline-filled, and I love those elements of it. I've had way more fun with this game on controller than mouse and keyboard, and I'm glad I made the swap over instead of being overly stubborn about this. And I think Space Marine 2 has been able to nail one key element of game design, and that is feeling good when you get good. The game flows better, you kill enemies faster, it feels more bloody, more visceral, you feel more like a badass the more and more good you get at the game. That can be a hard balance to strike, but I think Space Marine 2, so far at least, has been able to nail that feeling for me. And with that, I'm gonna call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Leave a comment down below with who your favorite faction of Space Marines are. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. Personally, I'm thinking either Dark Angels or like Salamanders for me. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.